Down, that was my last $2.
Good evening, everyone.
Howdy, howdy. We're going to continue our conversation on carburetors this week, and we're probably going to, for the guys that watch my channel on Facebook there and seen Chris Urachko dynoed an engine with a set of my Ram Air 5 heads and an intake just like this one on it. So we might discuss that a little bit too, but we'll wait till other people start coming around here. We're starting to see some people come in here.
Yep, Philip Third's here.
Hey Philip, how you doing, buddy? Tonight we got Ron Ike in the house again.
Yeah. Just here to drink beer.
He brought me some Oktoberfest. Samuel Adams Oktoberfest. I've never had it before. It is pretty good. And then we had drop his engine off today and drop off some Yingling lager, which my son's drinking one of those tonight. Mr. Tom Bopp. Thank you, Thomas.
Yep, thank you.
I don't see, is he on yet?
Joel Dubas, maybe. Ed Page and Old School Twist so far.
Hey, evening, everybody. So, while we got Ed Page here, I messaged John Marcella, and he is going to, I'm going to ship that cylinder head to him. I don't know if I'll get it out this week. I'm going to try to or not. I don't know if I will or not, because I'm going down to the Trans Am Nationals down in Dayton Friday. So if I can get it done tomorrow, we'll get that thing shipped up to John, but he said he would get that thing welded up for us. And luckily on that thing, doesn't look like it had a whole lot of damage. So mostly it's just superficial in the combustion chamber. The seat ring area isn't too awful bad. And so our microphones have been giving us fits, and my son's kind of trying, I think, figure that out right now. Mr. Glenn Peters, he was the one that brought it to my attention. He watches our show, and he watches it on a time delay or on a recorded instead of live, but and he's right. And I don't know if you guys are hearing it or not, but it's like it's weird. It's kind of like the microphone fades in and out on me, and I don't know about my son so much, but it definitely does on me.
Well, right now yours is the only one working.
That's the only. What's wrong with yours?
It won't connect for whatever reason, so trying to figure that out.
Well, that isn't no good.
It was connected. I don't know why it's not connected now.
Yeah, we got a few more people that showed up right now.
So we got Michael, Mark Marshall, Evan
Poge? Or Poge? I'm not sure how you say that.
Randy French, Tim Corsiak,
and Jeff Downey.
And Marty Nelson.
All right, welcome guys, welcome. But so yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the different circuits in carburetors tonight, so you guys know what they're for, what the location of them is, and why they're important to tuning a carburetor. So I'm going to start with a quadrajet plate here, base plate, and this camera here, I don't know if it's on or not, but
turn it on right now for you.
All right, let's turn that on here.
There we go.
Okay, so now this is just the base plate. This doesn't have the metering circuits and stuff in it, but it does have some pretty important ports or passages in it that have to be tuned properly for the carburetor to run right. So if you look down in there, and I don't know if you can see in there or not. Let's see if I don't have a pointer. I need something to point with. But there's a transition slot. I hope you guys can see that in there. Right in there. And what that has to be, whenever the throttle plates are closed, if it covers that transition slot up, that's not good. You want that transition slot to just pop out below the butterfly whenever you get your idle set right on the carburetor. And if you don't get that properly set, what ends up happening is you'll get a little bit of a bog or hesitation whenever you accelerate lightly to save away from a stoplight or trying to back into a parking spot or something like that. And so what a lot of guys will do whenever they run a big camshaft, and this is, let's see here, there's that transition slot right there. And so what a lot of guys will do when they put a big cam in the engine, because they don't know how to tune the engine properly, they'll drill a hole in this throttle plate and to let more air in, which allows them to close these throttle plates up so they can cover up that transition slot, and then you don't have that stumble. And you know what, that's an old hot rodder's fix, and actually I think even some of the factory carburetors done that. They put that hole in the throttle plate and to try to help tune the engine. But the proper way to do that is get your ignition timing set up properly, and then make sure that the idle circuit in the carburetor has enough volume to be able to adjust it so that you can make the idle circuit rich enough with a bigger cam. With a bigger cam, you get a lot of overlap. And whenever you get that overlap, what happens is you can turn that camera off here for now. When you get a cam with a lot of overlap, it actually requires a lot more fuel at idle. And so whenever whenever you smell that carburetor burning your eyes and your nose, a lot of guys think, oh man, it's too rich, so they want to lean it out. And that's the opposite of what you want to do. You want to actually make it richer. And the reason is because the reason it's rich, it's smelling and misfiring at idle, is because the mixture's too lean, and it is misfiring. It's not able to make a complete burn because it doesn't have enough fuel. So you want to make sure that you get that transition slot on a Q-Jet especially. Now on the Holley carburetors, like this is a Dominator, and this one here, you can see the transition slot a little bit on it, but it's got a transition slot as well. Now this carburetor here, I don't know if, okay, we're on, okay. This carburetor here, the throttle plates, I can look at this right now and I can tell you right now, it is not adjusted properly. The throttle plates are all the way closed. They're not even cracked open a little bit. So normally that throttle plate would be about that far, and you can see, I don't know if you can see in there or not, but whenever I get that throttle plate about where it's supposed to be, you can just see the bottom of that transition slot. And that's what you want to be able to see when you pull your carburetor off. And this is where the fuel's coming in. Your idle mixture screws are going to do when you adjust the idle mixture screw in or out, when you adjust it in, it leans it out. When you adjust it out, it richens it up. Now there are some exceptions to that, because the Holley carburetors, for whatever reason, they changed that, made it backwards on some of the emissions carburetors, and I don't know why they did that, but they did. But anyway, normally you turn it in to lean it out and turn it out to richen it up. The fuel's going to come out of this hole right here. And then as you start to accelerate, this is going to start pulling fuel out of the primary circuit of the carburetor for the transition. And you want to make sure that the idle circuit, so one of the things you can do to adjust the idle circuit, this carburetor here's got adjustable air bleeds in it. And so what I mean by adjustable air bleeds, these are actually removable. You can take them out, screw them back in, and you can change them, and you can change the actual orifice size inside of these. Typically on most of the Holley carburetors, this is your main idle, or your main circuit, which controls your booster and main jet, and this is typically idle. And then this one's a 3-circuit carburetor, so it actually has a 3rd circuit, and this one's actually plugged off, and that's an intermediate circuit. And whenever that intermediate circuit, whenever you're transitioning from part throttle to full throttle, down inside of here, I don't know if I can flip this over and show you guys or not, but this is the intermediate circuit transfer tube, fuel transfer tube. So this carburetor can be tuned from idle, mid-range, and high-end with these air bleeds and with the metering block. So with an idle circuit, to richen it up, what you can do, you can either restrict this, meaning you make that orifice smaller on the air bleed, or you can take the metering block off, and there's a restrictor in the metering block, and you can actually drill that out and make it richer that way too. If you do choose to do that, do not go more than like 2 thousandths at a time, because 2 thousandths is huge whenever you're starting to calculate the square area of that hole in the restrictor.
And if you drill that out, can you go back?
Nope, not usually. Now, some of the newer stuff, like the quick fuels and APDs and some of the really high-end carburetors, they actually have adjustable orifices inside the metering block too. This is not a billet, but they make a billet metering block, and then they'll put adjustable restrictors in that, and you can tune it that way too. And this one here's a four-corner idle circuit. So anybody who doesn't know what a four-corner idle circuit is, it's got an idle adjustment or idle fuel enrichment screw here, 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 and here. So all four corners of the carburetor. And that's what you ideally want, because that gives you a little bit more tunability, and it helps whenever you have a big camshaft with a lot of overlap. But so these air bleeds, when they're adjustable, you can tune that. So you can tune this by the idle circuit by reducing this one, makes it richer, making it bigger makes it leaner, of course. The main circuit's the same thing, same principle. Whenever you want to, but what happens though, whenever you start tuning the main circuit, the bigger you make this, the longer it takes for the booster to see signal, and it will actually lean the carburetor out really big time on the top end. So you have to be careful whenever you start playing with these air bleeds. Unless you really know what you're doing, you have access to the proper equipment to tune a carburetor of that nature for that type of tuning, you don't really want to mess with this stuff. The carburetor manufacturers are pretty damn good at getting these things where they need to be. And there's something else I wanted to tell you guys about this thing. So the idle circuit, main circuit, you can, this one, and so the intermediate circuit on this carburetor, like I was telling you, it's actually got a plug in it. It's not being used right now, so it's not drawing any fuel out of that little tube down here, and it's disabled. But you can tune that with this here as well. And then on your newer, higher end carburetors, they have adjustable restrictors in the metering block for that as well. And that's a great tool for tuning for I don't know, like if you have a tunnel ram, or if you're doing a blower application, or if you're doing blow-through turbo, something of that nature. That intermediate circuit could be a lifesaver and make this thing easier to tune for you.
B&R Racing asked, are all Holley 4500 Dominators 3-circuit metering blocks, or only modern Dominator?
Only some of them, and I don't know if even all the modern ones are 3-circuit or not. I do know that the older ones for sure did not have the 3rd circuit in a lot of them. And this is actually an older Dominator, and you can tell by the way that the top of the carburetor, you know, the Venturi entry is. The older style carburetors, they had like a little lip all the way around here. The new ones all are radius real nice here. And so this is an older one. It's a list number, this is actually a carb shop carburetor. I've had this thing for a long time, and I can't see the list number on it anymore, but no, that's a casting number for the body. But this is probably like a, I don't know, an 88, 96 or something like that. They had an old 4575, which is what they used back in the day on the NASCARs, and they actually had a choke blade in them, which is the only model Dominator carburetor that had a choke blade.
What CFM is this one?
This one here is, I believe, a 1050, so 1050 CFM. So that's determined by the Venturi diameter and the throttle plate diameter. This one here is probably, if I had to guess, I think it's a 2-inch throttle plate in this. And then of course, what a double pumper carburetor, say that 10 times fast, is it has 2 accelerator pumps, one on the primary and one on the secondary. They offer these in a 50cc, which is what these are. And then they also offer them in a 30cc, which is about half that depth on that accelerator pump. So it's a little bit shallower. But whenever you're running a big carburetor like this and you're trying to tune your accelerator pump cams, you want to make sure and use a 50cc pump. That way you don't run out of fuel.
Sugar Happy Customs wants to know if you could talk about blow-through carbs. He's got a quick fuel 850, annual roller boosters, and if you get a chance, if not, it's okay, no worries.
Well, what would you like to know? I mean, if it's something that I can answer the question, I'll be happy to do that.
So like with an 850, how big of a turbo can you go?
The carburetor size really doesn't restrict how big you can go with a turbo. Although what's going to happen is you're going to have a big restriction at the carburetor if you're using a blow-through style carburetor or setup. And I don't like blow-through. They're hard to tune. You can get them to work at idle, or you can get them to work at wide open throttle, but it's really hard to get them to work cruising down the road. I don't know if my buddy Walt Bainey's on tonight or not, but he had played with that a little bit with a Pro Charger and a turbo setup, and finally I think he just got fed up with it and quit playing with it. But my idea on that is that part of the problem is you're pressurizing the whole carburetor. You're pressurizing the fuel bowl and the venturi area of the carburetor because you got that bonnet over the whole thing. And of course, if you're doing that, these are normally exposed to atmosphere. These are your bowl vents. And so if your bowl vent is being pressurized and your booster's being pressurized, it doesn't see the difference in pressure drop in between atmosphere and the boost. So I always wanted to try and play with, and I never got to with Walt. I was going to do it, but we were going to drill his bonnet and put hoses on this and seal them off to the bonnet and see if we could control the fuel curve a little bit better with venting these to atmosphere instead of having them under pressure. If you do pressurize the bowls, now it creates a whole other problem. You got to make sure you have a solid float in the fuel bowl. If you have a brass float, it will literally compress it and crush it. So you have to have the proper floats in it. You got to have the proper needle and seat in it. A lot of guys, what they were doing back in the 70s and 80s, and I don't know if it's so much a thing anymore, but they would actually put a plate on the bottom of this, and they would have the boost, a line come down and pressurize the throttle area, especially the throttle shafts, because if not, it was blowing fuel out of the throttle shaft. So doing a blow-through carburetor, it is tough. I mean, it can be done, and there's guys doing it, but it is really tough. And then the problem with it is you got all kinds of fuel distribution problems. You can't get all the cylinders even. That's when you start burning pistons up and blowing head gaskets and melting cylinder heads. So I don't know. I'm not a big fan of a blow-through.
So in that case, Trigger Happy Customs, if you have more of a specific question, you can ask that. John Dornbush says, Sundays I go to Church of God, Wednesdays the Church of Pontiac Horsepower. Reverend Don Johnston and Brandon leading us to a better life through pure, prodigious, pavement pounding poncho power.
Yeah, I seen that on Facebook. I just didn't get a chance to reply today. I've been super busy today. I literally just got back to the shop like 20 minutes before the show.
And then BNR Racing says, racers say the 4500 Dominator is best. I have only worked with the Dominator once on a 582 big block Chevy and a Ratty 75 Corvette. Blueprint engine, like 800 horsepower, naturally aspirated. Just had to set the four-corner aisles.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get a good carburetor like an APD or a Quick Fuel or BLP, and especially if you custom order it for your application, you shouldn't have to touch that carburetor. Those guys have that so scienced out now that you can literally take it out of the package, bolt it on the engine, get your idle speed set your four-corner idle circuit, and run it. They're that good.
BNR Racing also said, Steve Morris knows all about boost with a Holly 4-barrel. His channel he uses or used it. CSU 4150. Funny watching him look at dyno graphs and uses intuition to tune it.
Yeah. Well, in all honesty, with the blow-through style carburetor, you can't use like a wideband. It really is not that accurate with the blow-through type carburetor. The fuel curve is so messed up with a blow-through, it's almost impossible. Honestly, you'd be better off, and I know it's hard on the turbo, but you'd be better off making an adapter so on the suction side of the turbo, it's pulling through the carburetor and blowing all the fuel through the carburetor or the turbo and tuning it that way. Almost kind of like the Turbo 301 Pontiac engine. They did a little bit different than that. They actually put like a plenum that created a low pressure area underneath of it, and the carburetor set on top of it and the boost was underneath of it. It's actually a pretty cool idea. And I think HO Racing made something like that too.
Philip III says, ironically, a blower is a suck through.
Yep.
And NHRA Bandit says he's running a CSU blow through on a Precision 88/91 turbo. And BNR Racing said BLP bow walls. I have a 4150 1085 CFM. Tech support is awesome.
Yeah, they are. Their tech support is above everybody else's. But BLP and Braswell too. Braswell's a good company. But those guys all build high-end carburetors for a lot of pro stock and well, not so much pro stock anymore because they're fuel injected now, but back in the day whenever pro stock ran carburetors, they built a lot of carburetors for them guys and comp eliminator, and they're probably still doing a lot of comp eliminator stuff. And comp eliminator is basically the poor man's pro stock, even though it's not poor. Them guys still spend big bucks.
Philip III says, please explain the difference between mating flanges and the sizes for those who don't know.
So I'm assuming what he's talking about is the 4150, 4500 different carburetors. Let me grab a 4150 real quick. Couldn't find a pretty one. I got an old ugly one. Alright, so this is a 4150, and actually I've got a 4150 to a 4500 adapter. So on this side is the 4150, this side's a 4500. You can see, I hope, in that picture that this opening here is quite a bit bigger than this one. So the bolt patterns are different. The 4500 bolt pattern is actually square. The 4150 is bigger this way than it is this way. So it's not a square bolt pattern, it's an asymmetrical, I guess you'd call it, I don't know. But anyway, it's not the same. You can't turn the carburetor this way, where the Dominator, you can turn it either way. Turn it this way or turn it this way. But that's a good illustration right there of the difference in size. And then this, you can see them side by side here. There's a huge difference in the 4500 and the 4150. The 4150 that I'm holding in my left hand, which probably right side on your screen, is probably, if I had to guess, I don't know what list number this is, but it's probably 1 3/4 inch throttle plate size, where the one on the Dominator is a 2 inch. So you can see there's a huge difference in those. And obviously, the bigger the hole, less restriction, the more air it'll move. And then, of course, we have Quadrajet, which has small primaries and big secondaries. So they call this a spread bore carburetor. And we built a lot of Quadrajets in our days. Ron, he used to work for me back when we did a lot of carburetors. I don't know if you remember that 55-gallon drum full of brass needles and seats.
Yeah.
I wish I had that today.
Yeah.
Back then, I ain't getting nothing for it. Today, that thing's probably worth a fortune.
Good money now.
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it was all the way full. It's probably halfway full.
Philip Third says, thanks, Don. Now I am no longer one of those who doesn't know. LOL, I never could keep them straight.
Well, Holley's got a bunch of different designations. They got a 4150, they got a 4160, they got a 4165, they got a 4185, they got a 4500, they got a, there's another one too, I forget what the other series, like a 4100 series, which is a Ford kind of a goofy bolt pattern, I think. It's a 41 or 4300 series, but yeah, there's so many different designations for Holley carburetors, crazy. But the ones that everybody's familiar with are 4150 and a 4500.
Philip Third says, 4150 versus 4500. I won't forget now. Where did I put my beer?
I hope I said it enough.
And then BNR Racing asked, does the 4500 provide better fuel distribution on a single plane intake for racing use?
Yeah, it all depends on the intake manifold. Pontiac has a problem with number 5 and number 7 cylinders, and for whatever reason, number 5 and so let's back up a minute. Probably the reason they have such a problem with it is, but we've seen it even when we change the firing order. But at Pontiac traditional firing orders, 184, 36572. So you got 5 and 7 firing right next to each other. And so when you do that, it's drawing real hard off of that one booster back in that corner, and it's gonna, it's gonna affect your fuel distribution. And I remember looking at one of John Causey's carburetors one year when we were in the Engine Master Challenge with him, and he tried all kinds of trick stuff to eliminate that fuel distribution problem in that corner of the intake manifold. As much as, I mean, he was putting little rings around the boosters on that booster only in that corner, and then he was taking and cutting pie shapes out of them so that he could try to direct the fuel maybe a different direction. I mean, he was doing all kinds of crazy stuff to try to get that problem to go away, and he could never get it to go away. And John Causey is one of those guys, when he was involved in a competition like the Engine Master Challenge, he literally wore the engine out trying to figure shit out. He would have, before we went to the competition, I wish they would interview him and see what he did run, but I'll bet he dynoed his engine 200 times before we went into the competition. Everybody else was lucky to get their engine together right before the competition.
Old School Twist said he had a 680 spread bore double pumper on one of his first Pontiac 400s. 50cc back pump worked great.
Yeah, I had I think they had a 650 and an 800, and I really like the 800s. I used to trick those 800s out all the time. We'd mill the air horn off of them and port the primary side of them, and those things work really, really well.
Trigger Happy Customs asks, what's it take to 4-7 swap small block Chevy?
Basically just a cam swap. You just got to get your cam ground so it's a 4-7 swap. And actually, if you're going to do the 4-7, really all you're doing, the 4-7 doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And if you go through the firing order and look at what's going on, basically all you're doing is taking 5 and 7 and moving it to 4 and 2. That's all you're doing. So I don't think there's any benefit. You're just moving the 2 cylinders firing together in the back to the 2 cylinders firing together in the front. I think a better idea is to run the LS firing order, and that evenly distributes the dynamics or harmonics across the crankshaft, as opposed to trying to move it from one end to the other. If I'm gonna have it fire together, I would actually prefer it on the back side where the flywheel weight is, so that that flywheel can absorb some of that energy.
BMR Racing said, "Holy cow, Kasi,
Sure.
Lord of the Rings out testing away."
Oh yeah, he had to literally rebuild the engine before he went to the competition, and then he would probably put another 50 pulls on it before he even left after that. So that guy was a machine.
Then Old School Twist said it was off a 69 350 horse 350 vet.
Yeah, okay. Yep, we used to play with a lot of spreadboard carburetors. We rebuilt a lot of spreadboard carburetors.
Still do blindfolds?
Yep, I'm sure you could too. Ron and I, man, we would do probably what, 5 to 10 a week?
Yeah.
It was a lot. Thank you, sir. So we rebuilt a lot of carburetors.
Everything had a carburetor.
Yeah, back then. And then everything, all the emissions cars back in the 80s and late 70s. Good grief.
McCoonies.
Oh yeah.
Those were fun.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to do the McCooney carburetor. We were the only ones probably in the state of Ohio, I don't know, but we got them from dealers because they didn't want to mess with them.
Trigger Happy Custom says, "I saw a vid from Ben Amaleta about needing to screw the dog gear from a gear drive to the front of the block. What's the easiest way? Right
What?
through the pin."
What is it now? I'm not sure I'm following.
I saw a video from Ben Alamanita about needing to screw the dog gear from a gear drive to the front of the block. What-
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so, I mean, basically what he's talking about is a gear drive instead of a belt or a timing chain. There's so many different gear drives out there. I mean, Donovan made a gear drive, Miladin makes a gear drive, I think Aries made a gear drive, and there's a whole bunch of companies I don't even know. But, and all of them kind of use a unique, different kind of way to attach their idler gears, what it is. It's the one in the middle. Pete Jackson, but they didn't attach it to nothing. As a matter of fact, I had a customer car. Thank God I was driving. Remember when Carl Glenn's car turned the front timing cover into a popcorn, a Jiffy popcorn? Yeah, it spit those gears out, and fortunately I was not getting on it. I was just getting ready to get on it, but I didn't get on it yet. And it didn't hurt the engine, it just quit running. But yeah, so it just depends on the manufacturer. Miladin is nice because what they do is they give you a plate that bolts on the front of the engine. You got to drill the block, and then it allows you to make a little bit of adjustment to it before you drill your final hole, which secures it down into position. And it's real easy to do. Basically, they tell you to take a piece of like brown paper or newspaper, and you run it through the gears, and when it's adjusted just right, it'll cut. You'll see the teeth cuts in the paper, and that's how we set those up. The Pete Jackson gear drive, they literally just sit in there and bounce around. I mean, that's to me is the dumbest idea ever, but that's what they did.
Accurate timing.
Yeah, your timing is real accurate there. But a gear drive is nice because it does improve your accuracy of your timing. And we discussed that before too, guys. I don't know if you remember it or not, but crank trigger is a huge benefit in horsepower because it's eliminating, if you think about what's going on. So if you got the crank spinning the timing chain, spinning the timing chain, which comes up to the top gear, spinning the camshaft, which spins the camshaft, which is long, so it's got ability to have torsional twist, and then you got slop in the distributor gear, and then you got slop in the up and down on the distributor shaft. So there's so much room for error there that the timing can fluctuate as much as 10 degrees throughout the RPM range. With a crank trigger, it's mounted right to the front of the crankshaft, and it is what it is. It's not bouncing around. It doesn't move, and it's proven 22 horsepower.
That's why all the OEMs use it.
Mm-hmm.
Phil III says, do you remember when NHRA Pro Stock had the separated carbs? What's that all about?
I don't know if they allowed them to split carburetors in Pro Stock. I don't think you could. Now the IHRA Pro Stock, I think, allowed them to do it, and I think in Pro Mod, before Pro Mod became mostly turbos and blowers, when they were running carburetors and nitrous, they ran a split Dominator too. So basically, they just bought Dominator carburetors, cut them in half, and then that way you could position those, because the runners, because the connecting rods are next to each other, the banks on the engine are offset slightly, and because of that, the runners on the intake manifold are offset slightly too. So if you were to cut the Dominator in half, you put one over top these runners, and this one here, if the runners are further back, you put it over top of those runners, so it would be staggered, it wouldn't be lined up. And it allows for a direct shot to the runner and a better fuel distribution.
DNR Racing asks, how do you like the Holly 4150 on Pontiac iron, Rammer 455 HO, Edelbrock DP intakes, Holly a match single plane?
Well, so I got a story to tell you about that, and I don't know if, do you remember, was you ever around when we rented Quaker City? And I took the Grand Prix, and I took like 4 different intakes and tried them that day. I don't know if you went that day. I don't remember if you were there. But anyhow, what we did was we used to rent the racetrack. And so I rented Quaker City one year, and we took a few of our customers. I made a mistake. I did it in May. That's way too soon for everybody. Normally, I pissed the track owner off at Dragway 42 because we made it look like a national event. We had probably 200 cars there, and there was a ton of spectators, and because I know a lot of people. So anyway, I did it in May. That one we did in September. I did it in May thinking that guys would want to get their car there so they could tune their cars before the season started. Well, I was wrong, because I think we only had a turnout of about 50 cars, and of course then you don't have a lot of spectators because they're bringing their family and friends, and it might be 100 people or whatever. So I learned from that. But anyways, I took my car, and because there wasn't a lot of cars there, it gave me the opportunity to try different intake manifolds. And with a Pontiac, it's real easy. You cut the water crossover off, and the distributor doesn't go through the intake manifold. If you grease the gaskets, you can literally change an intake manifold in minutes. It doesn't take a long time to do. So I took with me, now this was a 1980 Grand Prix I had with a 455 in it, and it ran 1150s to 1170s, we'll say. And yeah, my black and silver car, yep. And so anyways, what I did was I took a Doug Nash, I took a old Torquer, I took a Holly Dominator, Street Dominator, I took a factory intake manifold, and I took, there was something else I took, I think an old P4B or something. Anyhow, I had 5 different intakes, so we tried on that. And now, well, you know what, let me back up. I'm lying a little bit about the ET. Because at that time the car did not run 1150s. At that time I had a hydraulic flat tappet cam in it, and it ran like 1220s. But it still had a ram air 4 head on it. And believe this or not, the intake that worked the best in that combination, and this was a cam that I ground, was a hydraulic flat tappet. I called it my super or hot ram air 4 cam. And basically I chopped up a ram air 4 cam, tightened up the lobe separation, gave a little more lift, similar duration, and a little bit different ramp speed, and had those cams ground. And I still got a lot of guys who run those, and they're a killer cam. But that was the cam that was in it. And the ram air 4 heads at that time they weren't ported that much. They were ported, but not like they are now. And so you know, and the car was heavy because I had a roll bar in it and I don't know if I had a 12 bolt in that car. I think I had a 12 bolt in that car. And, but with the roll bar, full interior, power windows, power steering, brakes, all that stuff on the car still, all steel car, all the glass in the car. That car weighed right around 4,000 pounds and it ran right around 1220s. And it ran the best with the factory cast iron intake manifold. I was blown away. And it wasn't a huge difference, but the difference between the Doug Nash and the factory intake was 2/10 and about 3 mile an hour. The closest one to the factory intake manifold was the P4B, believe it or not, which is like a factory intake manifold as a dual plane. Now I contribute that to because the other intakes that I tried, the Holly Street Dominator, the early Torquer, and the Doug Nash, those are all single plane. The P4B and the factory intake are dual plane intakes. And because of the weight of the vehicle, and it had a 355 gear in it and like a 2800 stall converter, I just think that for that particular combination, the dual plane intake manifold worked better. And considerably better, actually. So, and that's what I ran. I just ran the factory cast iron intake with a Holly 800 spread bore on it.
I do remember that.
Old School Twist says you need one of those 59L Catalinas to put that Rammer 5 in.
He sent me a picture, and it is a cool car. It's too bad the Pontiac couldn't build that.
And then BNR Racing said, I have a Rammer 470 intake for my 70 TA, yet Rammer 4 4-speed worked awesome street, good drag, used a 1974 Super Duty 455 800 CFM carburetor.
Mm-hmm.
Original 750 for my car put away.
Yeah, the 800 CFM quadrijet carburetors, them things work awesome. I love that carburetor. Now we can discuss that factory aluminum intake manifold too. Believe it or not, the cast iron intake works better than the factory aluminum intake that came on the Ram Air 4s and 455 HOs. And the reason is because the plenum area underneath the carburetor on the cast iron intake is roughly about an inch deeper. And the reason that is because the aluminum intake, they put that cast iron heat crossover, separate heat crossover underneath of it. And to do that, they had to shrink up the plenum size on the intake manifold and reduce the plenum area, which really hurt the horsepower. So a Ram Air 4 engine, believe it or not, with a factory cast iron intake would make another 15, maybe even 20 horsepower.
BNR Racing said he wants to go Holly on his car for more CFM, keep the functional trap door shape.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd definitely be cool. You know I'm coming out with Ram Air 4 look-alike heads too. That are going to be kick-ass.
And Old School Twist asked, did you ever test any of the stuff Warrior had out, their tunnel ram or anything like that?
I had one of the, actually an original Doug Nash tunnel ram, which is what the Warrior, I don't remember the name of that company up in, I don't know if they weren't in Wisconsin. They might have been in Michigan that duplicated that, the Doug Nash single and dual 4 intake. Brian Whitaker, I don't know if he's on here tonight, but Brian Whitaker still has one of those tunnel rams on his 69 Grand Prix, and he ran it for years. And I think that car runs like low 11s, I'm not sure. But I never ran one. I had one for a long time. I never played with it. What was cool about that intake, you take the plenum off and you could bolt 2 Dominators on it. The bolt pattern was the same as the Dominator, and the hole sizes are right in the right location for it.
PNR Racing says, been waiting for your DCI Rammer 4. Philip III asked, what year was the aluminum intake?
First year was 69. the 69 Ram Air 4, and then 70 Ram Air 4, and then 71 two 455 HOs. And believe it or not, the 73 Super Duty had a cast iron intake, so did the 74. They didn't have an aluminum intake. And that 73 and 4 cast iron intake, those are kick-ass intake manifolds. Big, big money if you find one, because everybody knows that you got to have that to restore a car. But yeah, if you ever find a cast iron Pontiac intake manifold with, I think it's LS1 or 2 on the water crossover, that's a Super Duty intake, and those things really flow well.
Philip Third said, because he had a 455 HO, he sent you a picture. And Old School Twist said they were in Michigan. Remember the green 65 GTO with the 428? I think it was a low 11-second car.
Yeah, they actually had a, or no, that was HO Racing that did the 326. They had a real high RPM 326 with Ram Air 4 heads on it, a sheet metal tunnel ram they built. I don't know what the car ever ran. Maybe John Dornbush remembers, but I don't remember what it ran. I just seen an article, you guys might have seen it too on Facebook. What the heck's that guy's name that runs stock car back in 71? Peterson maybe? I don't remember now. Anyhow, he had a 71 GTO that they ran in NASCAR, and I know one time, those pictures I was looking at, it didn't have them on it, but I know at one time that car had a Ram Air 5 head on it. And that was a I think it said 355 cubic inch on the hood. So it must have, they must have went to the smaller cubic inch at that time.
Mark Marshall said, let's talk about that recent 1,100 horsepower NA DCI Ram Air 5 head engine.
I wonder when somebody's going to ask about that. That is a badass engine. Chris Urachko, he dynoed that thing about a month ago, and I don't know if you guys remember, I was going to reveal the numbers, but he wouldn't let me, and he wasn't real happy with it at that point in time. And what happens, guys, whenever you build a new combination, until you learn what the cylinder head, and the cylinder head dictates what everything does. So until you learn what the cylinder head likes for fuel, carburetors, he's kind of limited on headers. He's got to run the header that the customer provided because it has to fit his chassis, and the header can affect the fuel curve tremendously. And so the header's not optimum for what Chris Urachko is doing right now. Matter of fact, it's probably the farthest thing from optimum, but it is what he's got to work with. And so that engine started out, it was going to be kind of a max effort deal that he was going to do for the mile runs and half mile that they do at the airports and stuff, and maybe a drag week or something. But the guy that he's building that for has decided that, you know what, I'm going to pull back a little bit because I want to enjoy the car a little before we start doing that, because when you do a max effort engine, you're working on them all the time. They break all the time. And so he didn't want to do that quite yet. So he reined Chris in a little bit. They were originally going to build that engine with 17-to-1 compression, over an inch of lift, a lot more duration on the cam, bigger carburetors, a custom built header, you know, yada, yada, yada. And the unfortunate part about all that is I just rattled off like $15,000 worth of parts to pick up another 150 horsepower. You know, it sucks when you get to that level, but that's what it takes. And so anyways, that engine that Chris built, I think it's right around 12.5 to 12.7 to 1 compression. I don't know that for sure. I didn't build the engine, so I don't know some of the details. The camshaft, I can't reveal that information. That's kind of privy to Chris and the customer. I will tell you it's only got an 800-inch lift cam in it, though. So it's not the 1-inch deal that they were going to originally use. And so they reduced the compression, reduced the lift on the cam. I don't know about the duration, if they were going to change and chop that up any or not, but I do know that it's not the same cam that they were going to run originally. They're running this not sheet metal, but this cast intake manifold, And Chris designed these intakes, and they actually got a divider all the way up the runner in here, and it still has that in that engine that he just dynoed. And we're thinking that maybe cutting that down to maybe halfway down the runner or whatever will pick up some power. Another thing that's costing power whenever he dynoed that engine was it's got 118 pounds of oil pressure. And typically we've seen just going from like a 60 pound to a 100 pound pump, you can pick up 20 horsepower. So there's at least 20 horsepower in the oil pump reducing the pressure. And Chris knows that too. Him and I discussed that. So there's tricks that we can do. The intake, the oil pump is putting out too much PSI and putting a lot of drag on the engine. The other thing that was a concern was the carburetors. He had custom carbs built for that, but they're still not right. It's doing something goofy on the top end a little bit. The fuel mixture air fuel ratio is kind of, I don't know how to explain it, fluctuating, oscillating, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's not staying steady. And so he's trying to figure that out right now. There was another thing. They dynoed in the rain. Now, anybody that's tuned an engine before, yes, the dyno makes correction for the weather. Don't get me wrong. But the problem is whenever you're doing dynoing an engine in the rain, you got a lot of fuel or water in the air, a lot of water molecules in the air, and that really screws with the fuel curve. And so that was probably some of the problem he was seeing whenever you seen it, because you would see a fluctuation in horsepower on the top end of like 20, 30 horsepower, and it shouldn't do that. There's something with the fuel curve going on there that he'll figure out. And Chris is sharp. He will figure this out. So this is only second bat. First bat, he had, to give you an idea what carburetors can do, the first set of carburetors he ran on that engine, the engine only made like 1,030 horsepower. And he did nothing but change the carburetors because he ran out of time, he wasn't able to tune. And it developed a water leak. What had happened was they ported the head a little bit too much on the exhaust side, and on the ends of my heads there's water, behind the freeze plug, and they ported it real thin right there, and it cracked right there, so they had to fix that. So it wasn't anything to do with the head being bad or anything like that. Just, what they were trying to get the most they could out of this combo. So they got that fixed, and the carburetors made a huge difference. And then he was done. I think they ended up making like 11.11 or 11.10 or something like that first hit. And then they changed the carburetors. I think he degreed the camshaft a little bit differently. And by just doing those two things, even in the rain, in the poor conditions he had the dyno in, the engine went from that 1110 or whatever it was to 1140, but that's not the impressive number. The first time he dynoed the engine, it made 770 something horsepower or torque, and this time it made 850 foot-pounds of torque. So it picked up damn near 100 foot-pounds of torque. It was like 70, 80 foot-pounds of torque. Keep saying horsepower. That was the biggest thing that I seen. It was a big improvement. And so now what's going on is the customer wants, because it's the end of the season and he don't need the engine right now, so he wants Chris to go back at bat again, and I think they're going to send the carbs back and get them tweaked a little bit, and we're going to come into some fall weather, which has cooler, drier, crisper air. And knowing Chris, he's probably got a few more tricks up his sleeve. I'm impressed with the 1140. I don't know if you guys are or not. That's over 2 horsepower per cubic inch. That's pretty darn good for an engine that has only 800 inches of lift. I know it sounds like a lot of lift because we're used to 500, 600, but for a race engine, that's nothing. I mean, that's a baby cam. And anyway. This next go round, I think that Chris might be able to get that thing pretty close to 1180 horsepower, which that's pretty impressive. So I'm real pleased with it. I mean, I don't know what other people think, but from the comments, I think everybody else was kind of like, wow, that's pretty good.
Yep. BMI Racing said 1,100 horsepower naturally aspirated is a lot for any make of engine. And he also said you need a Pro Mod chassis that's big torque and horsepower.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. I know the customer because obviously I sold them heads, and I talked to him the other day, and he says, "Yeah, I got to do a little chassis work now." The engine he had in it before was a high port. I don't know what cubic inch it was, but it made 850 horsepower. So he's making roughly 300 more horsepower.
BNR Racing said, I have a question to pick your racing brain. What are bracket rail dragsters using for a radiator?
A lot of them, what they're doing is they're putting the radiator flat on the bottom of the frame rails and putting 2 electric fans on it. And that works pretty good. You put it out in front of the engine, and I would put it further forward so you got the weight on the front of the car. And then also, too, you got the longer tubes that run to the radiator, and it'll help cool the engine, too. I don't know if he's going to run that thing on gas or alcohol, but if he runs alcohol, he probably won't even have to run a radiator, honestly.
Phil Clark said the problem here is even when it's not raining, the humidity will kill everything, including horsepower as well as yourself.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what, I'm sure you guys have been to the track that race, and you go on a nice cool evening, and the car's running, you're thinking, man, this thing's never run so good. And then you go back next weekend, and it's a hot, humid day, and you lose 2/10. And that's even after making a couple of adjustments to the jetting. The atmosphere has a huge effect on horsepower, and that's why you correct for a dyno, but even with the correction factor in bad weather, it doesn't matter. It's still bad weather, and the engine doesn't perform well. Nothing like flipping that lid over on the old Pontiac with the quadrajet back in the day, and on a nice cool night hearing that carburetor come in, and you thought you were doing 200 mile an hour when you were a kid. We were probably doing 80.
BNR Racing said that recent video of mine you commented on, the engine got sold on Jeff, my buddy. Long story, his partner stuck it to him. Had to use a full water jacket, small block Chevy 410. We raced in September and 2024.
Bummer. Yeah. Well, I hear that a lot, unfortunately. And that I don't know what his goal is with that dragster. It looks like he's building kind of a nostalgia front engine kind of a deal, which is cool. And he's doing it just like they did back in the day. But honestly, that thing would probably run a whole lot better if it had a collector header on it instead of a Zoomy on it. But you know what? It's going to be fun no matter what, and because it's fairly lightweight, and he'll have a good time at it. And hopefully, he'll be competitive with whatever class he runs in with that thing.
Well, that's it for questions. It's 8:01, so we can wrap it up if you want.
All right, guys, I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. I'm running out of stuff, so maybe somebody can make a suggestion. But we covered the carburetors. Maybe, I don't know if you want to talk about intake manifolds or degree in a camshaft. We could maybe show everybody how you degree a cam. That would be fun. So we could do something like that. Teach everybody and show them how to go through the steps. And it's real important, and you're going to see why, too. When you see what I see every day, you're going to be blown away by the bullshit parts we're getting. I hate to go off on a tyrant. I'm not going to, so I'm not going to end on a bad note. I'm going to end on a good note, but we can go over that next week if you want, or something, whatever you guys want to talk about. You know what? Let me know in the comments, and we'll look through that and see what we got that we can come up with. So,
Yep.
but Somebody else make a suggestion there?
Nope.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, I think that we're going to wrap it up tonight. I appreciate you all coming,
Yep. Thank you.
and we'll see y'all next week.
Yep. See ya.